Welcome back. Children spend a majority of their time under the care of teachers and amongst peers. Teachers and schools are focused on providing an education to kids. But what about instilling morals and values, especially Islamic morals and values, so that kids know the importance of being good to their neighbors and praying 5 times a day? Is there an Islamic approach that we can implement? Omar Zia, instructor at Understanding Islamic Academy and curricular head at Thomas L. Kennedy Secondary School in Mississauga, will share his thoughts. Welcome back to our show, Omar.
Thank you.
So when it comes to schools, we have several stakeholders. Can you comment a little bit about what perspectives they bring to the table?
Absolutely. So there are several stakeholders in working at the education system. First and foremost is the school board itself. The school board itself takes a holistic approach when it comes to education, meaning that they have an inclusive agenda. Everybody within the education system has to be included. That means all cultures, all faith groups, and all identities as well. So that refers to the LGBTQ community as well. The perspective of the school board is that because they want everybody to be included, they had to set up a system where social justice is providing an equal and equitable place for learning and working for both staff and students alike. Another stakeholder are the teachers themselves. Teachers also have a stake in education, and they want to see their students succeed to the highest level. Teachers are concerned about the curriculum, but they are also concerned about the social and emotional welfare of their children as well. But every teacher, like every human being, comes with their own set of beliefs, their own culture, their own faith background as well. They may or may not choose to bring that faith into the classroom. Generally speaking, religion does not necessarily have a direct place in the classroom, although it might be indirectly mentioned depending on the context of the curriculum.
So how do parents deal with that? Because schools and teachers generally, you're rightly so mentioning that they don't have a focus in terms of teaching Islamic, not even Islamic, but general moral beliefs and values. Their focus is really giving the child an education. And looking at the social context that we're in nowadays with discrimination and Islamophobia is on the rise, how do parents balance that perspective?
Parents have to balance that perspective by educating in the home as well. And this is where a lot of parents don't realize that they actually are the next stakeholder in line. You've got the school board, you've got the teachers, then you've got the parents, and then the child themselves. The child takes an active role in education for themselves in school and outside of school, and parents also need to be aware of their role as a stakeholder in their own child's education. It's not enough for parents to say, well, they'll just learn it at school. Somehow school will just magically take care of all the problems of the world.
And raise them to be the best children.
Of course. No, parents need to take an active role in teaching kids manners, morals, ethics, etiquettes, how to conduct themselves in day-to-day interactions, how to have integrity themselves and uphold themselves with dignity, how to develop self-esteem. Those are all within the purview of the parent themselves, and it begins in the family home.
So how does the parent do that? Is there something from an Islamic context? Is there sort of a methodology or an approach?
Absolutely. So according to the prophetic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, actually mentioned 3 stages of life. That for the first 7 years of a child's life, the role of the parent is to nurture and love and care for that child. And by doing so, teaching them empathy and loving and developing a nature that gives. I call it a heart of charity. And for the next 7 years, as age 7 to age 13, the role of the parent is actually to teach the child. And in teaching the child, they're teaching them interpersonal skills, which is how to interact with everybody around them, intrapersonal skills, how to know more about themselves, teaching them how to develop their own identity, what it means to be a Muslim, no matter what context or what culture they're in, and then teaching them the basic Islamic and Canadian values, which generally speaking go hand in hand. The next 7 years, age 14 to age 21, the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught parents to befriend your child. And it's an amazing time in life when we reach that teenage years, because that's when they're basically like mini adults, and it's easier for a parent to communicate with them and to reach out to them and understand where they're coming from, because although we go through several psychological milestones, the teenage years are most similar to the adult mindset as well.
And you're talking about sort of the teenage, so we're talking 15, 16 onwards, right, to the adulthood.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest reasons that I talk about the teenage years in that context is because up until the age of 13, a child is an inductive reasoner. You can tell them what to believe and they'll believe it. By the time a child turns 14, let's say for example you say to a child when they're 11, 12 years old, you say smoking is wrong. And they say, yes, smoking is wrong. You say drinking alcohol is wrong. They say yes, drinking alcohol is wrong. Then also when they turn 14 or 15, you say to them smoking is wrong. What are they going to say?
Why?
Exactly.
I want to try it.
Because now they're a deductive reasoner. They have to deduce for themselves the principles of belief. They have to understand why we live life the way we do. And now they're able to problem solve. And that's where the role of the parent becomes more of a coach, more of a friend, rather than a direct instructor. And that's one of the biggest differences between the earlier stage of teaching and the next stage of being a friend. But one thing I want to make sure is that teaching doesn't stop at the age of 13. We still teach them into their teenage years. And love is not just for the first 7 years. That love and nurturing continues from age 0 all the way to their adulthood as well. And love, again, is an essential component of all 3 stages and beyond.
So this sounds very nice in theory, but practically speaking, what would you say to someone who says, well, it's great, I'd love to be, my teenager's friend, and I know I was a brat when I was a teenager, and I'm sure if my mom came to me then I'd be like, no, I don't want to be your friend. Hopefully she's not watching this. But how do you address that when we're living in a time where, profanity, kids are learning swear words as young as grade 2, for instance, disrespect amongst parents? I'm trying to understand, how do you practically play this out?
Okay, thank you. It's a great question. And in my experience as a guidance counselor, I have actually worked with a number of parents, and I've had parents who are not friends with their children at all. They're still very directive with their child, almost like a dictator in the household, which it doesn't lead to a very conducive household of communication or openness. And it's very difficult to be a proactive parent in that case. I've also met parents who are so friendly with their kids, you cannot tell the difference between them.
So there's no balance of discipline.
Right, and the lines of parenting are completely blurred. And in some situations I've seen the parents and the kids dressing the same, talking the same, and there's no way to discipline or teach a child at that point. And then I've seen the more balanced approach, where you always have a line. You are a parent first, and but you're also a friend at the same time. And becoming a friend with your teenager, it's a lifelong process. So when they turn 14 or 15, you don't all of a sudden let all the guards down and become their best friend or start talking to them and hanging out with them. That's not how it works. It's a gradual release of responsibility as they continue to grow and exercise that muscle of deductive reasoning. What we have to understand is that a parent lectures, whereas a friend discusses. A parent has limits and rigid rules, whereas a friend will negotiate some general basic rules that happen. A parent might be worried, whereas a friend expresses concern.
So it's about, as a parent, it's about finding the balance between these, rigid rules and then also where there's room for negotiation.
Absolutely. And allowing for you want, as a parent, to let your child develop normally. And you don't want to put too many restrictions on them.
What do you mean? Sorry, I just want to step in. What do you mean by develop normally?
Normal is a relative term. All right, and what I mean by normal is that within the context of our society, we don't want children growing up to be extreme in either of any viewpoint for that matter. We don't want them to be completely assimilated within society as well. We want them to have some sense of independence, but some sense of dependence as well. Independent as a being, but dependent upon the greater collective as a community. We want our children to grow up as part of a community and to make a difference in the world, but to do so in a way that's conducive to the betterment of humanity in general. Right? The Islamic perspective is always about human beings, humanity first, right? So it's always about improving ourselves to help humanity become better as a collective whole across the whole globe.
So Omar, we've talked a lot about the prophetic approach. Are there any mainstream methodologies that you can refer to?
Absolutely. So the 7+7+7 formula that I mentioned from the prophetic tradition, you'll also find that in the research of Jean Piaget, who's a very well-known child psychologist who was around all the way up till 1980, I believe is when he passed away. And he has exactly the same formula. He has a sensory and also the pre-operational mode, which is basically the first 7 years. Then you have the concrete years, which is also the next 7 years. And then you have the formative years, which is the next 7 years after that. So he follows the same type of idea as well. You may also find that, we're talking about the social context, but if parents are interested in learning more about specific ways on how to support their child during that middle 7 years of teaching them, they might want to refer to the work of Howard Gardner on the theory of multiple intelligences. There's also the Montessori philosophy as well. So Dr. Maria Montessori, and you've heard of Montessori schools, her basic philosophy is follow the child. And the idea behind following the child is to allow the child to explore and develop on their own. Earlier I mentioned developing normally. You asked what does normally mean. It really is about the child figuring out what they want to do in life, and for the parental stakeholder to provide an environment that supports that growth. To not set up specific rigid limitations that you must follow this occupation, or you must learn this way, or you must act this certain way. We want children to grow on their own and to learn on their own so they can develop the self-confidence, the self-esteem that they can succeed in whatever it is that they want to succeed in. And their parental point of view then becomes helping them to succeed with excellence, to pursue with excellence. So whatever they do so with the best potential that they can do, so that they can reach their potential. And the parents are there to support them in that respect.
This has been a very holistic discussion on parenting, so thanks a lot, Omar.
Thank you.